Now today we're going to be reviewing this. This is the Niche Duo. This is a 83mm flat burr grinder created by the people who made this. I mean, they look the same, but this is the Niche Zero. You've probably heard about it before. This is one of the most popular coffee grinders. A lot of people loved it. It set a gold standard for the time and the market that it was brought into, but today's different. Things have changed. There are more grinders now than there ever has been, and it does seem like there's a new grinder every other week, and then they released the Duo. And so is the Duo the new gold standard, the way that the Niche Zero was when it was introduced, or is it too late? That is a fascinating question, and that's gonna take a long conversation. Let's get into it. Now, I think it's important to start this off by saying this is the second time I'm filming this review. Thanks to Niche, I had this video completely filmed and ready to launch. Last week, I heard whispers of things changing with the Niche Duo, including price and options available for this grinder. Things that drastically changed my opinions, my initial opinions on the Niche Duo. Now, to be clear, I paid full price for the Niche Duo at £799. I had to ship it into Canada and pay import fees. I thought it was a little pricey. It was a good grinder, but pricey. But they've cut the price. And I want to explain why. It's not because this grinder's on sale. Originally, they had a tax on the Niche Zero for people in the UK. With that, it was included in the price. At 799 British pounds, you were paying for the tax of this grinder in that price. Now, I reached out to Niche to ask about this, and they responded very kindly, and they told me that they perceived it, that everybody in the UK was getting a slight discount, and everybody outside of the UK was more or less paying what the actual price of the grinder was. They were swallowing that tax for people inside of the UK. Regardless of how you feel on that, the price has changed because they are now reducing the price of the Niche Duo and the Zero so that if you're outside of the UK, you don't have to pay that VAT tax. That makes the Duo now £549 for one burr option and then $649 for two burrs. That makes this competitive against the DF83 and the Sculptor 078 at its current price point, which for me changes everything. Now, thankfully, I received the Niche Duo slightly early, a unit that I paid for by simply asking. I asked Niche if they could send me my unit a few weeks earlier so that I could share honest thoughts with all of you, because I think it's only fair that if you're putting your money into a product that you know what to expect before you receive it to your door, because there aren't returns on products like these. Originally, they weren't sure, they didn't say yes or no, and then I got a shipping notification that my unit that I paid for did ship. So thankfully that happened, and there will be no bias. They have no say and they don't get to see this video before you do, but I am appreciative that they did send this early so that I could get these thoughts out to all of you. So the Niche Duo is different than the Zero in most of its attributes outside of its aesthetics and workflow. One of them being obviously that flat burr. Now there are two burr options where the Duo gets its name, and there's an espresso burr and a brew burr. Those are Mauser ZM burrs, the 151F and B. To be brief and get to the point, I think the burr itself is a good burr. It produces good results for the money that you pay for that burr set. By no means is it an SSP burr, but you do have an espresso burr and a brew burr. In the espresso burr, you're gonna have the ability to do, textured body shots, very familiar traditional shots with added clarity over something like the Zero. It's gonna offer great flavor separation, more so than a conical can, at least this one. And I think the results are very good. And if you compare it to other 83mm burrs like the Itamill, I do prefer the Mauser espresso burrs over the Itamill stock burr personally. The brew burr is, again, something a little bit more unimodal in its grind distribution than something like the espresso burr, but by no means is it something like the SSP multi-purpose. The SSP multi-purpose burr creates incredibly uniform grounds, and the best way I can explain it is it creates really tasty, juicy, sweet cups, but it has incredible flavor separation as well. Something a lot of people think is desirable until maybe sometimes they try it. I think the SSP multi-purpose burr is a fantastic burr for a professional who wants complete flavor separation and complete transparency in the cup, but maybe not always the best burr option for somebody who wants a quick, easy to dial in coffee, something that can be used daily with little fuss. That's where we find something like the brew burr on the Niche Duo. I find it a good cup that produces very low astringency comparable to other burrs, but more than the multi-purpose burr in the SSP. I cupped them blind side by side many times, including things like the O Generation 2 and other burrs like the Item Mill from the DF83. I found myself often picking out the multi-purpose SSP burrs. They were incredibly obvious, but if you like that added complexity, then sometimes something like the brew burrs on the Duo are better. And quite honestly, if I'm just picking a grinder to brew coffee every day, I find myself leaning more towards grinders like the Duo or the O Generation 2 with its stock burrs. I think a lot of those grinders are better for the everyday use, but for the professional cupping or wanting the best results out of the cup with flavor separation, and the SSP multi-purpose burrs are obviously the best choice in that regard in this price point. All that said, that was a lot of Burr talk. The brew burrs are a good option. I didn't love the Item Mill's filter coffee. It was good. It wasn't great. I do prefer these burrs in the brew burrs. Again, like we mentioned earlier, flat burrs have been highly requested for the niche, and that's exactly what the Duo is. In an 83 millimeter flat burr, this is kind of that new phase of flat burrs. We've had 64, very popular in the industry over the past couple of years, and 83 is coming out with some new aftermarket burr options, which we'll talk about in this video. Now, this right here is the brew burr, and this one here is the espresso burr. With one bolt that is removable with this hex screwdriver that comes with the Duo, you can remove the bottom carrier. And you can see here, these are the brew burrs again. The nice thing with the Duo is that the burrs are actually installed right on the burr carriers, so you don't need to screw in the burrs themselves. The whole carrier just slides right into the grinder, and then you pop in the top burr, which is right here. You then screw in the hopper again, and now it's set up for the espresso burrs. And so how's the espresso? I think the majority of people who buy the Duo are probably gonna use this for espresso, so this is important. I think the espresso is good. It's what you would expect. It's textured in body, but far greater in flavor separation and creating very good, sweet cups of coffee than I found from the Niche Zero. I find those 83 millimeter Mazzer burrs are just a very good burr for most people in brewing espresso. And overall, as I season that burr with 3 to 5 kilograms of coffee, I found them to be much better. I would not recommend these for filter, although you can brew filter. Depending on your filter needs, especially if you like lighter roast, I would stick far away from this burr set, the espresso burr set, for filter coffee. I find it's just very astringent. It creates muddy beds of coffee, and overall, they're just not my personal favorite. Can you do it though if you just wanted one burr to brew them all? Sure, the espresso burr can brew both brew methods if you wanted to. If you like darker roast or you like dairy in your coffee, you may end up preferring something like the espresso burrs for its added body and texture to those cups. This is where things become a little more subjective, but I do think they're right on track here with suggesting that the brew burrs would be better for filter coffee. So where did Niche miss the mark here? Let's talk about some cons. Like the Zero, it's not perfect. It carries over a lot of the flaws from the Zero, and I'm a little sad to see that. Things like its shaky plastic lid are no different than the Zero, things that I criticized for years and many other reviewers did as well. And this being a flat burr grinder does create a lot of static. I would recommend using the Ross droplet technique, adding some water to your coffee beans to reduce static, because there's no ionizer built into here like other grinders, and there's no knocker on this grinder, which I would have loved to see. Even something like what the Sculptor offers in the Fines Cleaner, it would have been really nice to see something from Niche, something to remove just even more retention. I do find myself having to knock this grinder, tapping on the lid, shake the grinder around like I did with the Zero. Now the burrs themselves spin at 530 RPMs, and for 83 millimeter burrs, that's on the slower side. That said, the grinding speed doesn't seem to suffer. I typically grind through 20 grams in under 10 seconds, which I find very fast. This has a 130 watt motor. Now I asked Niche to comment on this, and they're very confident in the motor and gearbox that have been built into this grinder. That said, 130 watts could be questionable, and it's hard for me because I've been able to grind through everything. There's been no stalling issues, and it's felt very, very powerful. This is one of those things that with time, we're gonna find out if this is a grinder that lasts the test of time, like the Zero. This one here is almost 4 years old at this point, no issues. Or is it gonna die? Now, I mean, for the price, that's a risk you might be willing to take. And I quite honestly don't think that Niche is a brand that I would question in terms of the reliability at this point. So I'm not trying to be a fearmonger here and try to make you scared of this grinder, because there's really no reason to be at this point. It's just one of those issues that I need to bring forth so that you're aware that this at 130 watts is clearly, I wouldn't say underpowered, but less powered than its competitors. Again, for the home use, I'm torn on what to say here, because I definitely don't want to give them a pass, but is it an issue, or is it something as a reviewer that I'm trying to nitpick here? I really don't know where I stand there. It's one of those things, with time we'll find out if this is a non-issue or a big issue. I am optimistic though that Niche will back this grinder up if there were any issues, but I'm just the messenger. Don't quote me on that. Let me know what you think about that in the comments below. I've also got to make mention that the wood on the Duo isn't great. I've long criticized the Zero for the lack of quality in those wood materials. They feel like something you get from IKEA to me, and that may or may not be a subjective opinion, but I definitely expect more from a premium brand like Niche, though I know a lot of people who love them, so this might just be a personal take. And lastly, it is loud. It's much louder than the Zero, and if I put them side by side to grind some coffee, you'll notice that. It isn't a loud grinder like, let's say, the Sete or some other louder grinders like that, but it's also not quite like something like the P64 or even one of its top competitors in the Sculptor 078. That grinder is incredibly quiet in comparison. That being said, its other competitor, the DF83, is also very loud. But overall, I don't think this is unbearable. I think that lower RPM helps with sound here. It's very similar to the Zero. I'm nitpicking. I also tested the alignment on both of these burrs, and neither were perfect, but the espresso were better than the filter. I found the filter were favoring one side in doing the marker test, but the espressos were better, and this isn't surprising to me as they do have an indicator in which way to place the burr carrier when installing. And one last thing I want to mention with the Duo is its popcorning, and it's not great. I would have loved to see that reduced a little bit more. That said, compared to other flat burr grinders, it's much better. And it does have a lid here, so you're not gonna have a ton of issues with popcorning, though I have had a couple instances where coffee beans have popcorn and actually slid through the lid. It's fairly minimal. That said, it is there, and it's worth noting in this review. But with any coffee grinder that has a ton of cons, we also have a ton of pros here and things that Niche did get right. So I think it's only fair to mention those things, and we gotta start off with workflow. The Duo is identical to the Zero for the most part, and that's one thing that is just incredible. You know, the Zero has been praised as one of the best workflow grinders around, and the Duo is, well, it's a flat burr niche. It's what people wanted out of the Zero in a flat burr model. It's bigger, it's more powerful, it's got 83mm burrs, and it's got a very similar workflow. The workflow is especially great if you don't plan on swapping your burrs often, you just plan on locking in with one respective brew method with that burr set. I think you're gonna have a great time. I think the workflow is equally as good as the Niche, if just a little worse because of the popcorning and the burr swap, but otherwise it's nearly identical. It's faster, it is a little louder, but that workflow is nearly the same. I love the fact that they put 83mm burrs here. I think that's the right choice. A lot of people might argue 64 might be the better way to go. I think that would be the wrong statement to say, because 83 is the future of flat burrs. SSP has already just announced and released a lab suite Casper, a multi-purpose brew burr, a high uniformity burr. All the burrs that are popular with 64mm are now available on 83mm. That said, they are a little more expensive, and that's to be noted. So if you plan to do an aftermarket burr on the Duo, you're going to pay more for those aftermarket burrs than what you would on a 64mm alternative. But I do think that the results are there and they're worth the extra money personally. I am a fan of the aesthetics of the Duo. I think it's obviously similar to the Niche Zero. It's just a chonky boy version, and I don't have any issues with that. And the dose cup has always just been such a nice feature with the Niche Zero. I've always been a fan. I prefer to use a dose cup than I would having just a portafilter right in here. I love the ability to shake up my coffee grounds, pour them into a portafilter directly, and that hasn't changed with the Duo. What's left for us to do now? Brew some coffee. Let's give these a try. Let's talk about that right after this quick ad from today's sponsor, which is Ritual. Now, let me ask you, do you have a perfect diet day in and day out? Yeah, me neither. Now, Ritual helps people fill in the gaps of their diet with no shady additives, filters, or colorants. These 2 easy-to-take capsules provide 10 nutrients to support a strong foundation for your health. I personally enjoy Ritual for its modern take on otherwise overwhelming task. Which multivitamin is best? Am I taking the right one? Can I trust this company? Now, speaking of trust, Ritual is a brand that I can trust because of their transparency in the ingredients that they use. You can trace their decision-making process behind each of their ingredients, from where they source their nutrients and why to their environmental impact. They're also transparent about their packaging and their materials, and they even use 100% plant-based ink with different options like essentials for men, and they also offer a multivitamin for women, a 50 plus, prenatal, postnatal, and a teen vitamin. And to make it all easier, you can get the 10 high quality nutrients that your body needs delivered to your door every single month, which, I mean, hey, that's the kind of convenience that we have come to expect in the world that we live in today. But hey, don't simply believe me. If you're interested, I would challenge you to try it. Use the link down below or the discount code of Rowsell20 to get 20% off your first month. Go try it, get the vitamins your body needs, and thank you, Ritual, so much for sponsoring this portion of the video. I have 2 espresso shots here. As you saw, Natasha came in here, swapped these around. The one that is the Duo has a little red dot on the bottom, so I'm gonna see if I can pick out which one is which. I think I'll be able to. Let's give these a try. I think this one's pretty easy. I think this one is the Duo. And before I check, the reason I think that is this one has a nice sparkling acidity. It's got nice flavor separation. This one is very chocolate forward. It's very heavy on the mouth. It's got this lingering, like, mouth coating texture, which some people love. Obviously really nice for milk beverages. The mouthfeel is definitely heavier on this one. And this one just had a really nice acidity, where the acidity was far muted on this one. And I think it also lacked sweetness compared to this one. A more blended cup, where this one I could get some tangerine, plum undertones. And for us, this is actually our Marmalade Cola Washed Guatemalan Field Blend here at September. And for me, it just really brought out some of the best attributes in that coffee for espresso, where this one here just felt a little more mundane. Let's check. Yeah, so this one is, you can see the little red dot there. That's the Duo. Let's brew some filter coffee. All right, same deal. One of these is the Duo, one of them is the Zero. And again, I think this is gonna be pretty obvious. Let's try it. They're both good cups of coffee. Don't get me wrong here. We are nitpicking and we're comparing. That said, I definitely prefer this one right here. When you're comparing something like the Niche Zero, which is like an espresso conical burr, that produces a lot of fines, you're gonna get a lot of texture in the cup. Now, this is really great if you like chocolatey cups of coffee, that you like bodied cups of coffee, maybe you like darker roasts. The Niche Zero does a good job for that. But on the other hand, if you're brewing a light roast, and here we have a washed Colombian roasted by September, it's juicy, it's got a nice acidity, it lingers, where this one here just feels muted. This one just doesn't have that same acidity, where this one here, it's nice, it's juicy, it's sweet. Now, that's my comparison. Now let's see if I'm correct here. I better be. Okay, I don't know if you can see there is a red dot. Let me dump this out. So that is the Duo. I think what you get from a flat burr grinder like the Duo really shines on filter coffee and really shines on single origin, black espressos. It's just the better grinder for flavor separation and clarity than the Zero. And then you might wonder, what about, well, what about these two? The Sculptor 078S, the DF83. Kyle, you've got to compare the two. Listen, friends, I've got you covered. All you have to do is get subbed, because this is going to be the next video. It's just too big of a comparison to give you 3 minutes of footage here in this video. But these two are most similar, and the DF series has always competed against the Niche. It's really been out there, as Hoffman once put it, the niche killer, right? Now we have another niche killer, but in the bigger size. Again, this is the version 1. I don't have the version 2, but the version 1 DF83 against the Niche Duo, I think they're very different grinders. For me, this is more of an espresso focused grinder. Obviously you can do filter, but the way that the workflow works on this, the portafilter forks on the front here, this one takes a slight advantage in the workflow for espresso. For me, I do think the Duo out of the box is the better filter coffee grinder. And when these new SSP burrs come out, this is going to be a tighter comparison. So hold for that big comparison video, because we need to talk about it. But when it comes to espresso, I do think I prefer the cups that the Duo creates. Again, this is the version 1. The version 2 is different. This is a very polished grinder and a very beautiful grinder, but this one's $30 more. I find myself wanting to lean towards this grinder. I think the build quality is comparable to the DF now, but there are certain elements like a bellows that I'm just not a big fan of. The power on the DF is much higher, and so that might be a selling feature for many. The cup profiles, I do lean towards the Duo out of the box. Obviously SSP burrs are available, and the price comparison between these is incredibly similar now that they've lowered the price on the Duo for people outside of the UK. But this for me has the better espresso workflow, especially if you're going to put this on a bar. But for me, if you're just brewing espresso and you're not worrying about filter, I might lean towards the DF. If you're doing a bit of both, I'd probably lean towards the Niche. Hold for full thoughts for the comparison coming up in the next video. And that all leaves us with the final question, and that is this the new gold standard? Is this what the Niche Zero was, but today in 2023? And I have a hard time saying that yes it is. While it has all the beautiful charm that the Zero has in terms of its workflow, out of the box, and that's the only thing I'm reviewing this on today, this is a grinder that has beautiful results, but not perfect results. And for this price, it's really hard to beat for a flat burr grinder with zero retention. If I was to buy this, I would buy it with one purpose in mind, either espresso or filter. And if you're planning to do that, I think this is a good grinder. If you're planning to buy this for both brew methods, all I would say is that you need to understand what kind of filter coffee you want to brew. If you like darker roast with dairy, or you like that chocolatier body, then the espresso burrs are the burrs I would go for a one burr does all, out of the box at least. But the filter coffee suffers on that espresso burr set. It's not terrible, it's not bad, but it's not great. That said, you can't do espresso with the filter burrs. So if you're okay with swapping burrs, well, I'll leave that for you. All that to say, today I'm not giving the Duo the gold standard stamp as I did with the Niche Zero. I think times are different. Had this grinder come out earlier, it may have been different as well. There are other 83mm grinders on the market today, and what the Duo is not revolutionary, but it's very good. And I think you shouldn't just skip past this grinder because there are better grinders on the market today. I think especially with this price drop, the Duo is incredibly intriguing, and I think it's very competitive. I am excited to compare the Duo against some of the top competitors in the market today. And quite honestly, this is the flat burr niche that we were hoping for many years. Unfortunately, I do feel it might be a little too late to take that gold seat and gold standard, but I do think this will be a very competitive grinder for years to come. And if you're buying the Niche Duo only for filter coffee, well, then this is where things get tricky, because unless you're planning to put aftermarket burrs down the line, I don't think the filter burrs in the Niche Duo are that much better than something like the O Generation 2. You might be better off spending money on that grinder and saving money unless you plan to future-proof yourself and do espresso in the future, or add aftermarket burrs to elevate that cup even further. If you enjoyed this video, it would mean the absolute world if you tamp that like button down below on the way out. Be sure to share this with a friend online. Also, if you want to support the channel, check out the Patreon down below. You can win free gear and coffee that I give away monthly. Right now I'm giving away a DF64V, which is a grinder we'll be reviewing very soon on the channel. Check out our roastery down below as well, September Coffee, that's in the description. And if you made it this far in the video, well then let's do a throwback. Let me know by writing Tamp Squad. Tamp Squad, we'll see you guys all in the next video. Love every single one of you guys. Have a wonderful day.